So today we'll talk a little bit about how to migrate and modernize your applications in the cloud journey that the customers are going through as they transition or transform from their on-premises data centers to the VMware clouds or the native public clouds. As a way of introduction, I'm Sesh Sayani, Head of Product Management for vRealize Network Insight. Now, on the transformation to the multi-cloud network, I mean, it's no longer an on-premises data center, right? I mean, anybody who is still in that world are really rethinking about where their applications are hosted, how the network needs to evolve along with the scale and the kinds of applications that are being onboarded. For example, now, this is the old world. I mean, when I say old, it is still a traditional data center architecture with a leaf-spine network and how the applications were consisted of VMs and a bunch of servers, right? We're all used to it. It still exists, but the world is kind of moving in a crawl, walk, run stage to the modern multi-cloud network where the apps are everywhere, the users are everywhere, accessing from anywhere. Especially, we have been in this mode for now coming up on 2 years, a little over 2 years, where the remote users have are accessing their applications from any location. But also the customers are kind of democratizing the cloud itself. It's not anymore about one cloud. We have customers who have a 4+1 strategy, interestingly, 4 native public clouds and 1 on-premises cloud as well, because they want to have the redundancy. And they're making the decisions based on where the cloud is well supported by the vendors themselves. In some cases, those clouds could be VMware own stack on the public cloud, like VMware on AWS, VMware on GCVE, Google or Azure, for example, or Dell VMC, or native public clouds. So we have customers in different varieties on how they're hosting their applications, how they're moving their applications. But now the application persona itself is slightly different. It's not VMs and bare metals anymore. They still exist, but now you have containers, Kubernetes stuff, whether OpenShift or native Kubernetes or Tanzu, there are different form factors of that. Again, as I mentioned, VMware clouds and public cloud. So this is an evolution that we have seen. It's here now. It's not some future vision. We have already seen this. We have customers in that journey, but they are moving at their own pace. It's not click of a button and then they migrate off, right? I mean, there is a planning phase that goes through it. Sometimes they don't even know what applications are hosted in the on-premises to make the decisions as to where they should be in the destination, right? So how do you help that journey as they evolve? Now with that, so we came up with a kind of a 5-step process. And again, this is if you had asked us this about 1.5 years back, we probably knew 2 or 3 of these steps, but we have seen this evolve. So now we can kind of repeat this process. And then it's finding a lot of resonance with some of the customers who are doing this, who are on this journey. So imagine a customer who's in the customer data center, their applications in the on-premises, and then their journey, their new CIOs or the Chief Digital Transformation Officer, there's new titles that are out there, the CDOs who are coming, and their mantra is, hey, I need to move off, right? My on-prem CapEx is pretty high. I got to move to the cloud. They get to decide what clouds it is, for example. But their charter is to get them off. We are actually seeing customers who are both regulated customers and non-regulated customers where they have to pay penalties for staying on premises longer than expected, right? So they have to move off. Now, how can we help accelerate that journey? Now, the first thing, obviously, is the collection of the assets, right? I mean, it's pretty easy to say, hey, I'm going to move. Okay, fine. What do you have? Most customers have I think I have this, but I don't know. Right, so how do you get that entire visibility of the estate itself, whether it is physical, virtual, the IP endpoints, for example, et cetera. So, and then not only the assets as in raw assets, but the group of assets that can be formed as an application, right? Some are COTS applications, some are custom-built applications. What are those applications? So you can make, and what are the dependencies between those applications themselves? So you can make decisions. Okay, I need to move application A, B, C, and D because they're communicating with each other. So when I move a migration to wherever the destination is, I can move them together. So I'm not taking care of these egress costs of wherever they are, right? So you need to know that application boundary definitions, et cetera, as well. Once you have that, once you've identified that, this is where vRealize Network Insight Universal fits in, and Martin will cover this in the demo. But this is a critical phase. First, identify the assets, group the assets into the respective applications. But once you have done that, the third phase is, well, I migrate, right? VMware has sister products, the HCX, the hybrid connectivity product, as well as the NSX, which is the network, network security products as well. So with a combination of these, can we migrate them off as workloads and also secure them? Because again, one of the mantras of the CDO is the migration. The other mantra is zero trust. How do you secure them as soon as they are migrated? Or even pre-migrate, can you secure them so when they land in the destination, you're already up and running. You're not worried about that. So how do you do that process, right? Number 3. Now, this is where we would have stopped. Great, right? The migration day would have been complete. But a big change that we are seeing is also modernizing these apps. Now, very rarely there's inertia that gets built up because, hey, my app is working fine. Why do I need to containerize it? Don't fix what's not broken, right? But this is a chance for the customers to look at their applications and then say, now because it's cost effective, since you're moving to a destination where you're paying by the compute, is it efficient to re-architect that application to a container-based architecture where it actually shrinks the footprint, but still doing the same performance? How do you modernize those applications as well? VMware obviously has Tanzu, Kubernetes services, different flavors. But can we help in that migration journey to transform their applications rather than just a migration of the applications? That's a big wave that's also happening to move those customers into that transformation journey. And then finally, you land. Right, you have taken, again, this is not linear. I mean, even though the curve looks linear, nobody is doing it in one shot, right? So there's always iterative process that happens. You tier up the applications, move the first set, watch it, then move the second set. So you almost need to watch the destination about how much traffic is it taking up? What do I need to do? So it's almost like a continuous operations as well. And my team here, my friends here, the vRealize Log Insight is one of those products which is part of the vRealize Cloud Universal that will also monitor the same destination as well, right? I mean, once it's in the destination, are the applications behaving well? Is there any issues with the applications? Any issues with the compute resources, for example? Right? So you need to look at the continuous operations. But more importantly, this is a wave. This is a kind of not a loop, not a wave, a loop, where you make a decision, you transform, or you migrate, now come back and do it again. Right? Because you have thousands of applications. We have customers who did not realize it till they ran these algorithms that they found 20,000 applications. Right? How do you move 20,000 applications? Right? It's almost like 6 months, 9 months, a year project to move them. Now they all have different ways. Some are heavily professional services. Some may say for the first wave I'll hire the professional services, but for the second and the third and the fourth wave, I want an easy button. I want to do it myself. I don't want to come back and do it because it's my timeline. But we have seen this wave happen. We've had multiple successes with multiple customers in this journey. So over the next 45 minutes or so, we'll walk through some of these use cases themselves. Now, as I said, one of the customers who has gone through this journey, they have spoken with us at VMworld in the past, is IHS Markit. IHS Markit was recently acquired by S&P Global. So they actually moved this. They used Verni this was even before Verni was not Verni Universal, but Verni as a networking inside product, because we had the application grouping. They looked at the assets, identified the assets, and moved off from on-premises data centers. They had a lot of sockets, a lot of CPUs in the on-premises sort of hosts. They moved off into VMware Cloud on AWS. Right? That was their journey. They're continuing their migration. Right? I mean, again, this is a publicly referenceable case study on VMware website, but this is done. Right? They were able to move 1,000 workloads in 6 weeks. That's brilliant, right? I mean, if you can do that, that's great success after planning all that. Again, I'd invite you to watch this video for this customer. But again, it's real. It's not a small potatoes company, right? For the size that they migrated off. Now, as I mentioned, that is the migration wave, right? So we've migrated. I mean, again, if you have any questions, let's make it interactive. If you have any questions about how it happens and so on, Martin will cover that in the demo. But if you have any questions, please shoot off. The other part of that is, as I talked about it, the migration through HCX. HCX is our hybrid connectivity product where it takes the workloads and then moves it off into the destination into environments. Now, one thing I do also want to mention, if I can go back to a couple of slides. Now, when I said multi-cloud, we are also, this is not just about the destination being VMware cloud. We actually have customers who are using the same model and also making decisions about public cloud as well. So some customers have actually taken this. They're using their own little tools to do the migration itself. How do you migrate from VMware on-premises to the public cloud? But the idea of grouping the assets and making decisions about moving to a public cloud is still the same wave. We just had a good win with one of the largest pharmaceutical companies in the world that just did this, where they were actually taking the workloads from their on-premises and then moving it off to native AWS, for example. Right. So this is a process that works for both VMware cloud stack as well as native public cloud as well. Now, going back to the modernizing part, about 2 months back, maybe February maybe, VMware also announced a new product called Application Transformer for VMware Tanzu. So this actually, what it does is it integrates with vRealize Network inside Universal, gets those applications that Vernie, for short name for vRealize Network Insight, has identified, and gets those application boundaries, and then recommends to the customers, okay, hey, this web tier can be containerizable because they have some signatures, for an Apache application or a JBoss or some of the middleware. They have signatures for a few well-known applications. They can look at the application, look at the processes inside the VMs, because VMs has VM tools in it. They can suggest that, hey, rather than migrating it lock, stock, and barrel as a VM, we can give a better option of containerizing it. And they have been out there for a couple of months already. It's GA'd. So we said, why not put the two together, right? Make that as an option to the customer as their journey continues on their migration wave. They can do the same thing too. This has found early success. So customers are using that model as well to transform too. Now, again, remember the way you secure application traffic or secure traffic for containers is slightly different from VMs, right? I mean, what do the firewall rules look like, etc. But if you've taken, you cannot just apply the same firewall rules again, because of the VMs are now decomposed into pods and namespaces and clusters. What does that language for the firewall rule look like? So the zero trust model needs to be relooked at after the modernization of these applications. Now, that is the preamble into the migration modernization wave. But why vRealize Network inside Universal? So we just announced this about a month back. The idea behind this was what we found as customers were migrating, they did not want to abandon their on-premises monitoring solutions, right? Vernie always was an on-premises solution, or it had a SaaS form factor as well. But what they found was, hey, I want to keep that monitoring of the on-premises estate because I'm not completely abandoning it, but I also want a new way to monitor my destination estate, for example, right, in the BMC or the native public cloud. And then I want a federated view of both the on-premises and the new monitoring estate. So we said, okay, let's come up with a new model called the Universal, where you can federate your views, single pane of views across multiple Vernie instances. For example, we've had customers who are in Australia and the US. We have customers of 60 data centers who are monitoring through vRealize Network Insight. Trying to scale up all in one is not recommended or may not apply. So we said, okay, let's come up with this model where you can federate across multiple instances. So towards that, we identified 3 use cases. One is the federation view, a single pane of glass view across multiple instances as you are going through the migration wave. Maybe you start off with what you had, then you migrate to the new destination, you spin up a new instance to monitor that. Then maybe as you complete your migration, maybe you abandon the old one, but you need both of them to be alive at the same time. But you still want a single pane of glass across both instances. That's number one. The other one, again, as we look on this journey, one thing that we realize is customers are ready for SaaS consumption, right? Not everybody needs to have an on-premises. They are like, I don't want to pay for managing the monitoring tools themselves, or I don't want to pay compute estate for the management tools. can VMware provide a hosted service? So that's where the SaaS instance comes in. Customers are more ready now than a year or two back, right? So we use that wave to say, okay, as you're migrating, this might be the perfect time to, because you're already cloud ready, you're migrating to the cloud, why not have the monitoring estate and management estate also in the cloud, right? So this will help with the journey. Now, the final part of it is the trade-in, hey, I have on-premises instances, how do I trade in for the cloud instance? So we got some incentives to help the customers move to the cloud, to the SaaS consumption model. So that was the genesis behind the vRealize Network Insight Universal. Again, three things, right? Universal views federated across multiple instances, exchange of licenses, so that they are still getting value for what they paid already, and then help them in the cloud journey because they may have customized a lot of data in the on-premises instance. How do you move that into the SaaS instance as well? You don't want to lose all that customizations. So that's the model. Now, Network Insight Universal, it doesn't work if you don't support multiple clouds, right? As I said, 4+1 strategy for some of the customers. So they may have 4 instances for the respective destinations because it might be different operators operating the different instances. But the God admin or the Uber admin wants a federated view across all these instances, but the individual destination owners may want to own their own Bernie instances. But this gives them the flexibility. It could be because of scale, it could be because of geolocation, it could be because of role-based controls, whatever the reason, right? As they're going through this migration waves, right? But having that federated view helps bring all of it together. Now, this is a quick, Martin will double click into this specifically about how this works. This is a way of all these federated instances. As I mentioned, there are 4 different Bernie instances across the globe, right? A single federated view of all the health of the instances themselves, the health of the assets in those instances. Again, this is not to replicate every Bernie instance's data because that's not the objective here. But the idea is to double click on health. Let's say, for example, if you're the God admin, if you're the super admin, and you want to see, hey, let's assume this is a location in Europe, right? Let's say somewhere in Germany, one of the network switches has gone kaput, or one of the network switches is degrading, or one of the data centers is degrading. The Uber admin is sitting and watching this, and then may want to call into the German team and say, hey, I see this switch flapping a lot. I see some of the issues there. Some of the applications have degraded. You may want to go take a look at that. The other use case could be, as you can see, some of the applications here in the top right, there are 76 applications that we've discovered. Obviously, it's too small a number, but you might want to say, hey, where are those 76 applications? If my goal is to move all those 76 to destination A or split 76 into destination A and B, are they migrated or not? Right now it is 76, but I want to make sure that they are in A and B, and then the others are abandoned, right? So this actually gives you a view of all your application estate. But same thing with firewall rules, et cetera, right? Kind of brings in the federated view, not without replicating all the data with indicators for health, so customers can double click into the specific instance for more troubleshooting.
I'm one of my customers is very deeply into the VMware ecosystem. They have VROps for operations, capacity planning, whatever. They use VRA for automation. There's this Verni or whatever it's called application that you're presenting. And I'm trying to understand, who are you selling that to? Who are you targeting in the enterprise? Because obviously you talk here about single panes of glass, but the reality is that the people I'm working with, my teams, they're working with VROps, they're working with VRA and so on. So it's not really a single pane of glass. So who's the audience for that product?
So this, as the name gives away, Network Insight is networking, right? It's the network persona who is going to attach. So for example, Verni by itself is bundled with NSX, right? We are attached to NSX, okay. We are sold with NSX. So pretty much every NSX sale includes Verni because while VROps does a fantastic job of the compute virtualization and the storage information, and then my team here, the Log Insight team, looks at the logs holistically, okay. And automation looks at how do I automate these things at scale, deploy new applications at scale. Verni is focused on the networking piece, right? And NSX is the networking piece. And what we also found, and again, this is universal across, I'm using the word universal in a light sense here, is most all compute is going to be attached to a network at the bottom, whether leaf spine, tar leaf spine switches, data centers, network firewalls, etc. Right? So just monitoring the compute itself is not enough for them to troubleshoot an application performance. They need to look at the network as well. That's where vRe fits in. Now, when you look at the last arrow here, where we say vRealize Cloud Universal plus vRe Universal, and I'll share this. This is public knowledge. Raghu, our CEO at last VMworld, talked about this project called Project Ensemble, which is kind of actually building. It's not a single product. It's a user experience. To your point about how do we bring all this user experience together? Because
what I'm thinking about, if that's what you're coming to, I'm thinking really about the modularity of that, because I don't want to have to install many things. Okay, you may have to install components for vRe, you may have to have something or VROPs, but when you talk about single pane of glass, I would like the people to get a kind of a full experience. I go to one place, I get everything, and based on the role, the persona, whatever you want to call that, they get the modules that they need to work. That will be
exactly.
Really awesome.
So this bullet, I was debating if I should introduce that word ensemble here or not, but since you brought it up, I might as well. And this is public, so we are in tech previews, early access. Feel free to drop us a note. So where we are working on this unified experience of kind of behind the scenes, take away the complexity of deployment of these collectors, right? We don't want the customers to identify that I need to do 4 collectors. I need to do the collection the same way. So we're trying to reduce the complexity, but the user experience looks like it starts off from a single pane, right? Whether it includes networking information, it looks at compute information from VROPS, networking from vRe, logs from Log Insight, and it also allows customers to automate it. Now, but also remember, again, as you said, based on the roles, if an application goes bad because of a network score, right? Because if the underlay is the one that is causing the application to misbehave, they could double click from that application viewpoint and then go into vRe for deeper troubleshooting. But the single experience brings all these tools together. Okay, and that's the discussion that we had at. I mean, I'll politely point to the discussion that Raghu and a few of our folks demoed at last VMworld as tech preview. That's definitely on our roadmap. Should be coming out sometime this year. But this is the federated view across the various instances to identify the health of your infrastructure, the health of your assets, health of the specific vRe instances themselves. In this case, again, looks like there are 4 vRe instances across the globe, and this gives you a single pane of glass access across this. To your question about licensing and so on, as I mentioned, the way the customers would procure this is, VMware sells this by the sockets. So let's say we buy 1,000 sockets, and the customers are on this journey. Now they can decide upfront if they're not ready for a full SaaS deployment. They want to keep it all on premises. They can deploy those 1,000 sockets across the on-premises instances. Okay, 250 each, let's assume. Now, as they make their journey to, let's say, a destination, they could say, hey, you know what? Let's say I want to abandon some data center in the West Coast here, and I want to move into a SaaS VMware hosted based model. I could do that by abandoning those instances and move those 250 licenses to be managed by the SaaS instance. And they can do all this as they are doing their migration way, or they could keep it if they are in the GDPR compliance and so on and so forth. It's possible that Europe might decide that I'm going to keep my vRe on-premises instance on-premises. I don't want to move to SaaS because of compliancy, but they will just need to report up their licensing to say, hey, this is how much I'm consuming. So if there are any billing and overages happen. So the idea here is customers get the flexibility of how to deploy, where to deploy, all SaaS, combination of SaaS and on-premises. But the federated view, this view that I'm showing right now, is a SaaS-only view. So if you purchase this, you're entitled to not only get the flexibility, but also the single pane view across all your instances.
Are you going to talk about where the SaaS runs from?
Sure. So all VMware SaaS services are hosted on AWS, and we are in different regions of the world. We are in US. I don't have the slide up. I'll just rattle off US, Germany, Frankfurt specifically, because we found some, because of the EU split, Frankfurt, London, I believe Singapore, APAC. We have it in Germany, Australia, and just last week in India. So it pretty much covers the globe wherever, and the way we do it is we as collective, because we're all part of the vRealize cloud, wherever we have a vRealize cloud universal, we make sure that there's an instance available to support. But again, right now it's all AWS hosted. And then the way we spin up new instances is business case. Okay, we have a bunch of customers who want to deploy to, let's say, pick a region, right, in some other region that they want. For example, India happened like that because we found a few customers who wanted hosted services out of India. So we said, okay, let's spin up a SaaS instance there.
So by multi-cloud, you mean multiple clouds as long as it includes AWS?
No, the hosted service doesn't have, hosted service is completely different from the destination cloud of where the workloads are.
If you actually want to use SaaS version.
SaaS version is always AWS today. But when we have customers who are using our SaaS instance, but monitoring Azure, for example.
Okay.
So the hosted service, you have to pick a vendor. All VMware hosted services are AWS hosted, but they again monitor multiple clouds. So again, I kind of mentioned this again, the one license. So if this did not happen, if this was not available, the way the customers would have had to deal with was, hey, I buy X sockets for a SaaS instance, X sockets for this data center, Y sockets for another one, and they're not combined, they're not federated. I'm not exaggerating. We have a customer who has 69 vRealize instances. That's how big of a scale they have. Now, we would love them to go into this model so they can get a federated view, but they have chosen to be on premises. But I think another year or so they'll come around for a federated view approach as well.
So I still have questions about the SaaS model. So you're buying licenses that can be used either on-prem or in the cloud. So I just have to keep buying licenses. It's per. If I'm using a SaaS model and I'm purchasing a per vRealize instance, and that's how I purchase it. So like, how does it? Is it easy to expand it?
Yes.
Okay.
So you would. Let's assume. I'll give a simple example. The customer IHSM that I just talked about. Without giving the counts, they are north of 1,000 plus. Okay, licenses. Now, most customers, as they are migrating, they are also consolidating. Some workloads don't need to migrate. Some workloads can die off, etc. Right. So those 1,000 that they purchased for on-premises could be reused once they move to VMware Cloud or a native public cloud. So you're not buying it again. Now, they might grow to say that I'm going to onboard another 1,000 applications and more workloads. So I'll expand more licenses. That gives us the flexibility. We have billing cycles that some customers purchase long-term commits. They buy 1-year terms, 2-year terms, 3-year terms because of the discounted purchases and so on. And some customers want to buy on demand. I don't know what my growth is going to be, so let me watch for the next 6 months how my growth is, and then I'll make the commitment. Again, you have all the flexibility based on this.
So when you're talking about the license instance, you're talking about the number of cores that an application would use, not the number of cores that a vRealize would use. No,
it's got nothing to do with the vRealize itself. It's number of cores. So I would be slightly backing up a little bit. We go by the number of CPUs on which those VMs. So for example, let's say a host that has 2 sockets or 2 CPUs. The old world may have 10 VMs because it's not an optimal server. But the new server, even with the same sockets, could have 25 VMs. So we're not counting by the VMs, we count by the number of CPUs on that host. So you're still buying 2 CPU licenses. VMware is on a trajectory to go to a core-based license that's still in works. But to your question, it's not the vRealize core. Okay. It doesn't matter the vRealize core. That's not what it is licensed for.
I understand that now. I just, it wasn't clear until you started talking about it that way. And so in that case, when you're actually running containerized applications, those can expand or contract as necessary. How do you make sure that your licenses are expanding and contracting along with those applications?
Good question. So today what we do is we average out the billing over a month. So ephemeral stuff goes up and down, right? Containers being classic example. So in whatever case, those container pods, so since we're not monitoring by the number of containers and not by the number of pods, we are monitoring by the number of CPUs on which those containers are running. So the host is a host, right? I mean, it has 2 sockets, 4 sockets, 6 sockets, whatever it is, right? So we are licensing by those. Now, let's assume, for example, the customers bring on some compute resources online, then abandon that, in a variation of a month, in a span of a month. We average it out and say, hey, for this month, you haven't gone past your billing. You purchased 1,000 sockets, you've been within that limit. And we understand as part of the migration, they may double count a little bit because they haven't abandoned the source yet. They are still migrating to the destination. So we have flexible ways to what we call as cap, right? We cap it at a certain point so we don't bill them, overbill them as well. Again, that's the advantage of SaaS. We can do all those manipulations to make sure that the customer on their migration journey are not double paying or double counting their licenses. We've been pretty flexible, and that's where this, as you can see, the vRealize Cloud Subscription Manager is the one that is keeping us all honest. Okay, this is what it's reporting. For example, Log Insight. Log Insight is bundled by the gigabytes of storage, right? So are the customers going overboard? Subscription Manager is maintaining that because that's what they purchased for. But if they go overboard, should you report that? What capacity? The same thing with CPUs, right? Are they going overboard? What do we bill? So the subscription manager keeps us all honest by counting these up and then reporting on a monthly basis to the customer.